In a small, quiet neighborhood where everyone knew each other by name, Emma Thompson lived in her dream home. It wasn't a mansion or anything extravagant, just a cozy little house with a big backyard that felt like her own private sanctuary. The highlight of this backyard was an enormous oak tree that stood tall and proud right in the middle. This wasn't just any ordinary tree. It had been there long before Emma moved in, probably for decades, if not centuries. Its thick branches stretched wide, creating a canopy of shade beneath which Emma loved to sit with a cup of coffee on lazy afternoons. Birds nested in its higher branches, squirrels darted up and down its trunk, and even the occasional deer would wander into the yard to rest under its protective cover. For Emma, the tree meant more than just aesthetics. It symbolized stability, a connection to something bigger than herself. In a world where life seemed to move too fast, the tree reminded her to slow down and appreciate nature's beauty. She often joked with her friends that the tree was practically part of the family. Her kids, now grown and living their own lives, still talked fondly about climbing its sturdy branches when they were younger. Even visitors couldn't help but admire it. "That tree is magnificent," one neighbor once said during a summer barbecue, and Emma agreed wholeheartedly, but not everyone shared her affection for the old oak. Across the street lived Karen Miller, a woman who prided herself on being the most involved and arguably the most opinionated member of the Homeowners Association, HOA. Karen fancied herself as the unofficial leader of the neighborhood, always making sure rules were followed to the letter. Whether it was reminding people to mow their lawns regularly or scolding them for parking cars on the street overnight, Karen made her presence known. She saw herself as the guardian of the community's standards, though many residents secretly rolled their eyes at her constant meddling. Karen's latest obsession? The view from her bay windows. Her house sat directly across from Emma's, and while she appreciated the general charm of the neighborhood, she couldn't stand how Emma's tree blocked what she considered a pristine vista. From Karen's perspective, the sprawling branches ruined the clean lines of the landscape, obstructing her ability to see beyond Emma's property. Every time she looked out her window, all she could focus on was that massive tree standing smack in the middle of her otherwise perfect view. At first, Karen tried to approach the issue diplomatically, or at least as diplomatically as someone like Karen could manage. She brought it up during one of the HOA meetings, suggesting that certain trees might need trimming or removal to enhance the overall appearance of the neighborhood. When no one else voiced support for her idea, Karen singled out Emma's oak tree specifically. "It's overgrown and unsightly," she declared, tapping her pen against the table for emphasis. "Something needs to be done." Emma listened patiently, biting back her frustration. "That tree has been here longer than any of us," she replied calmly. "It provides shade, habitat for wildlife, and adds character to the neighborhood. I don't think cutting it down is necessary or fair." The room fell silent as the two women locked eyes, neither willing to back down. Eventually, the meeting moved on to other topics, but Karen didn't let the matter drop. Over the following weeks, she cornered Emma multiple times, trying to convince her to reconsider. Each conversation ended the same way, Emma politely but firmly refusing to cut down her beloved tree. Despite Karen's persistence, Emma remained steadfast. After all, the tree wasn't harming anyone. It was simply existing. Why should she sacrifice something so meaningful just because Karen wanted a better view? Still, Karen's complaints grated on her nerves. It wasn't just about the tree anymore. It felt personal, as if Karen was challenging Emma's right to make decisions about her own property. As tensions simmered between the two women, whispers spread throughout the neighborhood. Some neighbors sympathized with Emma, agreeing that Karen's demands were unreasonable. Others, however, sided with Karen, believing that maintaining a uniform look was important for property values. The divide grew wider with each passing day, turning what should have been a peaceful suburban community into a battleground of opinions. Then came the moment that changed everything. One sunny Saturday morning, Emma woke up to an unfamiliar noise coming from outside. At first she thought it might be construction work happening nearby. But as the sound grew louder and closer, curiosity got the better of her. Wrapping herself in a bathrobe, she shuffled to the window and peeked outside. What she saw stopped her cold. Two men wielding chainsaws stood in her backyard, hacking away at the base of her oak tree. Sawdust flew everywhere as chunks of wood tumbled to the ground. Standing off to the side, arms crossed and wearing a smug expression, was Karen Miller. Emma's heart sank. For a split second, she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Was this really happening? Rushing outside, she shouted, "What are you doing?" The men paused briefly, glancing at Karen for guidance. Without missing a beat, Karen stepped forward, her heels clicking against the pavement. "This is for the good of the neighborhood," she announced, her tone dripping with self-righteousness. "You've ignored every reasonable request we've made. Someone had to take action." Emma stared at her, dumbfounded. "You can't just cut down my tree. It's my property." Karen shrugged dismissively. "Actually, I checked with the HOA guidelines and there's nothing explicitly protecting oversized trees like this one. Besides, these guys are professionals. They know what they're doing." Fury bubbled inside Emma, but she forced herself to stay calm. Arguing with Karen wouldn't stop the destruction already underway. Instead, she grabbed her phone and began recording everything. The chainsaws buzzing, the falling branches, and Karen's smug face overseeing the operation. By noon, the once majestic oak lay in ruins, reduced to piles of splintered wood scattered across her yard. Neighbors gathered along the edges of Emma's property, some shaking their heads in disbelief, while others muttered quietly among themselves. A few even snapped photos, sensing that this incident would become the talk of the town for weeks to come. As Emma surveyed the wreckage, tears welled up in her eyes. The loss felt unbearable. Not only had Karen violated her space, but she'd also destroyed something irreplaceable. Little did either woman know, karma was about to step in and turn the tables in the most unexpected way possible. But for now, Emma retreated indoors, feeling defeated, yet determined to fight back. After all, this wasn't just about a tree anymore. It was about standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. The day after the tree-cutting incident, the neighborhood buzzed with gossip. Word had spread quickly about what Karen had done, and opinions were divided. Some neighbors thought Emma was being too sentimental about a tree, while others believed Karen had gone too far. Still, no one dared to confront Karen directly. She had a reputation for being intimidating and unyielding. Meanwhile, Emma spent most of her Sunday indoors, staring out the window at the barren spot where her beloved oak tree once stood. The absence of its shade made the backyard feel strangely empty, almost foreign. She couldn't shake the feeling of violation, like someone had trespassed not just on her property but into her personal memories. Karen, on the other hand, seemed triumphant. She walked around her yard later that afternoon, admiring the newly unobstructed view from her bay windows. "Much better," she muttered to herself, sipping a glass of iced tea. From her perspective, she'd done the neighborhood a favor. The towering oak had always been an eyesore, ruining the clean lines of the landscape. Now, without it, the view stretched open and clear, revealing the neatly trimmed lawns and pristine houses beyond. Karen even took a few photos of the updated scenery, planning to share them during the next HOA meeting as proof of how much nicer things looked now. But nature has a way of reminding us that we're not entirely in control. That evening, dark, clouds rolled in, signaling the arrival of a thunderstorm. These storms weren't uncommon in the area, especially during this time of year, but something about this one felt different. The air grew heavy and still, charged with electricity. Lightning flashed across the horizon, followed by deep rumbles of thunder that echoed through the streets. By the time night fell, the storm had intensified, unleashing torrents of rain and fierce winds that whipped through the neighborhood. Emma heard the storm raging outside but didn't think much of it. She was too preoccupied replaying the events of the past 24 hours in her mind. What could she have done differently? Should she have fought harder to protect her tree? As guilt and frustration swirled inside her, she tried to distract herself by reading a book or watching TV. But every loud clap of thunder pulled her attention back to the storm. Across the street, Karen paid little attention to the weather. She was busy scrolling through social media on her phone, occasionally glancing out her window to admire the now unobstructed view. Her sleek Tesla sat proudly in the driveway, gleaming under the dim porch light despite the sheets of rain pelting down. It was her pride and joy, a symbol of success and sophistication. She loved showing it off to her friends and neighbors, often boasting about its cutting-edge technology and eco-friendly design. Nothing, she thought, could touch her perfect car. Then, just as the storm reached its peak, disaster struck. A massive gust of wind tore through the neighborhood, toppling trees and scattering debris. One particularly strong blast sent a large branch crashing down onto Karen's driveway and right onto the roof of her Tesla. The impact was so sudden and violent that it shattered the car's windshield and caved in the entire roof. For a moment, there was silence except for the relentless pounding of rain. Then came the unmistakable sound of metal groaning under pressure as the weight of the branch crushed the vehicle further. Karen didn't notice immediately. She was still inside, scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone. When she finally looked out the window and saw the destruction, her jaw dropped. Dropping her phone, she bolted outside, shrieking at the top of her lungs. "No! No, no, no!" Her voice carried through the storm, piercing the cacophony of rain and thunder. She ran to the car, slipping slightly on the wet pavement, and stared, in horror, at the mangled remains of her prized possession. The once sleek Tesla now resembled a crumpled soda can, its elegant curves destroyed beyond recognition. Neighbors peered out their windows, some gasping in shock, others stifling laughter. A few brave souls ventured outside with umbrellas to get a closer look. "What happened?" one man asked, trying to suppress a grin. "It's her fault," Karen screamed, pointing dramatically toward Emma's house. If she hadn't planted that stupid tree in the first place, none of this would have happened. Emma, who had stepped outside to check on her own property, overheard Karen's accusation. She raised an eyebrow, incredulous. "Excuse me?" she called back, raising her voice to be heard over the storm. "You cut my tree down yesterday. This branch clearly came from somewhere else." Karen spun around, her face red with rage. "That doesn't matter. You should have taken care of your property better. You're responsible for this mess." Emma crossed her arms, her expression calm but firm. "Funny how karma works, isn't it?" The crowd of neighbors exchanged amused glances. Even those who initially sided with Karen found it hard not to see the irony in the situation. Here was Karen, blaming Emma for damage caused by a tree she had destroyed. It was the kind of cosmic justice people only dreamed about. By the time the storm subsided early the next morning, the neighborhood was abuzz with chatter. Photos of Karen's totaled Tesla circulated online, accompanied by captions like "Karma is real" and "Payback's a branch." Some neighbors joked that the tree had retaliated from beyond the grave, while others speculated whether Karen would learn her lesson. Karen, however, wasn't laughing. She spent hours pacing in her HOA living room, fuming over the ruined car. To make matters worse, her insurance company informed her that the damage might not be fully covered since the branch appeared to have fallen due to natural causes rather than negligence. Furious and desperate to assign blame, Karen decided to take legal action. She couldn't let Emma get away with what she perceived as gross negligence. After all, if Emma hadn't insisted on keeping that monstrous tree in the first place, none of this would have happened, or so Karen convinced herself. The following week, Emma received a formal letter in the mail. It was a lawsuit filed by Karen, accusing her of failing to maintain her property and causing harm to Karen's vehicle. Reading the document, Emma felt a mix of disbelief and anger. How could Karen seriously expect to hold her accountable for something she didn't even cause? Determined to fight back, Emma reached out to a local attorney named Mark Reynolds, known for handling tricky property disputes. Mark listened intently as Emma explained the situation, nodding along with a slight smirk. "This is quite the story," he said when she finished. "Don't worry, we'll handle this." As word of the lawsuit spread, the neighborhood split into factions once again. Some rallied behind Emma, organizing fundraisers to help cover her legal fees. Others quietly rooted for Karen to lose, hoping the ordeal would teach her a lesson about meddling in other people's affairs. Either way, everyone agreed on one thing: this drama was far from over. For Emma, the lawsuit became more than just a legal battle. It was a chance to stand up for herself and set an example for the rest of the community. She refused to let Karen bully her into submission, no matter how much money or influence the woman threw around. And as she prepared for the courtroom showdown ahead, Emma couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. Who would have thought that a simple tree could spark such chaos? Little did anyone know the real fireworks were yet to come. The lawsuit filed by Karen against Emma quickly became the talk of the neighborhood and beyond. Word spread like wildfire, not just among the residents but also on social media platforms where screenshots of the legal documents and snarky memes about karma began circulating. People who didn't even live in the area weighed in, turning the incident into something of a local legend. Some called it poetic justice, while others saw it as a cautionary tale about overstepping boundaries. Either way, everyone wanted to know how this bizarre drama would unfold. Emma, for her part, wasn't surprised by Karen's decision to sue. She knew Karen well enough by now to expect such pettiness. What did surprise her, though, was the wave of support she received from her neighbors and even strangers online. A GoFundMe campaign set up by a sympathetic neighbor raised thousands of dollars within days to help cover Emma's legal fees. Friends and acquaintances stopped by her house to offer words of encouragement, bringing casseroles and baked goods as if preparing for a community potluck. One elderly woman even handed Emma a handmade quilt, saying, "This is for comfort during tough times." It was clear that many people saw Emma's fight as more than just a personal dispute. It was a stand against entitlement and bullying. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down on her crusade. Convinced she was in the right, she hired an expensive attorney named Richard Langley, known for his aggressive courtroom tactics and flashy suits. At their first meeting, Richard assured Karen that they had a strong case. "We'll argue that your damages were directly caused by negligence," he explained confidently. "If the defendant had simply removed the tree when asked, none of this would have happened." But as the weeks went by, cracks began to show in Karen's seemingly solid argument. Mark Reynolds, Emma's lawyer, wasted no time digging into the details of the case. He requested copies of HOA guidelines, property records, and even security footage from nearby homes. When Emma handed over the video she'd recorded of Karen orchestrating the removal of the tree, Mark's eyes lit up. "This is gold," he said with a grin. "It proves she acted without permission and violated your rights." Mark also discovered something else that worked heavily in Emma's favor. The branch that destroyed Karen's Tesla hadn't come from Emma's oak tree at all. After consulting with an arborist, he confirmed that the branch belonged to a neighboring tree, a fact that completely undermined Karen's claim. Armed with this evidence, Mark decided to file a countersuit against Karen, accusing her of trespassing, vandalism, and causing emotional distress by illegally cutting down Emma's tree. As both sides prepared for trial, tensions in the neighborhood reached a fever pitch. Neighbors whispered behind closed doors, speculating about who would win and what the outcome might mean for the community. Some openly mocked Karen, calling her HOA Karen, and sharing memes comparing her to cartoon villains. Others defended her, arguing that Emma should have been more cooperative from the start. The divide grew so wide that even casual gatherings turned into heated debates. Karen, for her part, seemed oblivious to the growing resentment toward her. She continued to act as though she were the victim, lamenting to anyone who would listen about how unfairly she was being treated. "I'm the one who lost my car," she exclaimed during a tense exchange at the grocery store. "She ruined my life." Emma, on the other hand, remained calm and composed throughout the chaos. She attended every pre-trial hearing with quiet determination, letting Mark handle the legal intricacies while she focused on staying grounded. Her friends often commented on how gracefully she was handling the situation, especially given the stress of going up against someone as relentless as Karen. "You're inspiring us all," one neighbor told her after a particularly grueling deposition session. Behind the scenes, however, Emma wasn't immune to the pressure. Late at night, when the house was quiet and the weight of the lawsuit pressed down on her, she found herself replaying the events leading up to the lawsuit. She wondered whether she could have done anything differently, whether there was some way she could have avoided this mess altogether. But then she reminded herself why she was fighting. This wasn't just about a tree, it was about standing up for herself and protecting her home. If she backed down now, what message would that send? That bullies like Karen could get away with whatever they wanted. As the trial date approached, the media caught wind of the story. Local news stations sent reporters to interview both women, eager to capture the human drama behind the headlines. Karen, ever the self-proclaimed Queen Bee, welcomed the attention, posing dramatically for photos next to her totaled Tesla. "Look what she did to my car," she cried, pointing at Emma during one particularly theatrical interview. Emma, meanwhile, kept her responses measured and respectful. "I feel terrible that anyone's property was damaged," she said when asked about the incident. "But the truth is, I had nothing to do with it." The public reaction to these interviews further highlighted the divide between the two women. Viewers flooded comment sections with opinions, many siding with Emma for her poise and restraint. "Karen sounds unhinged," one commenter wrote. Another added, "Emma seems like the kind of person you'd want as a neighbor." Even late-night talk show hosts joked about the feud, with one comedian quipping, "Sounds like Karen needs to take a chill pill, or maybe a whole forest of them." Despite the mounting pressure, Karen refused to back down. In fact, she became even more determined to win, convinced that proving Emma guilty would restore her reputation. She poured hours into preparing her testimony, rehearsing lines with Richard until they sounded convincing, or so she thought. But as confident as she appeared, cracks began to show in her demeanor. Friends noticed she was drinking more wine than usual, snapping at people over minor inconveniences, and obsessively checking updates about the case on her phone. Emma, meanwhile, leaned on her support system to stay strong. Her kids called regularly to check in, offering words of encouragement and reminding her how proud they were of her resilience. "Mom, you're doing the right thing," her daughter said during one phone call. "Don't let her bully you." Even her ex-husband, whom she hadn't spoken to in years, reached out to express solidarity. "If you need anything, I'm here," he texted. It was a reminder that sometimes adversity brings people together in unexpected ways. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. The courtroom was packed with spectators, including curious neighbors, reporters, and even a few strangers who had followed the story online. As Emma took her seat beside Mark, she felt a mix of nerves and resolve. This was it, the moment when everything would come to light. Across the aisle, Karen sat stiffly, clutching a folder of documents as though her life depended on it. For once, her usual air of confidence seemed forced, her smile faltering under the scrutiny of the judge and jury. The proceedings began with opening statements. Richard launched into a passionate defense of Karen's position, painting Emma as reckless and negligent. "My client suffered significant financial and emotional losses due to the defendant's refusal to maintain her property responsibly," he declared, gesturing dramatically toward Karen. Mark countered with a calm yet compelling rebuttal, emphasizing the lack of evidence linking Emma to the fallen branch and highlighting Karen's illegal actions in cutting down the tree. "This isn't just a property dispute," he said, looking directly at the jury. "It's a question of accountability and respect for the law." Over the course of several days, witnesses testified, evidence was presented, and arguments were made. The turning point came when Mark played the security footage showing Karen directing the landscapers to cut down Emma's tree. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the video clearly showed Karen taking charge of the operation without Emma's consent. Richard tried to downplay its significance, claiming it was irrelevant to the damage to Karen's car, but the damage was done. The jury exchanged knowing glances, and Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat. By the time closing arguments rolled around, the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Mark delivered a powerful summary, urging the jury to consider the bigger picture. "This case isn't just about a tree or a car," he said. "It's about fairness, responsibility, and holding individuals accountable for their actions." Richard, sensing defeat, resorted to desperate appeals, accusing Emma of playing the victim and manipulating public opinion. When the judge finally dismissed the jury to deliberate, Emma felt a strange sense of peace wash over her. Win or lose, she had done everything she could to defend herself and her principles. Whatever the verdict, she knew she had earned the respect of her community, and perhaps taught Karen a lesson about consequences. Outside the courthouse, reporters jostled for position, microphones in hand, waiting anxiously for the jury's decision. Inside, the tension was palpable. No one dared to speak as the clock ticked by. And then, finally, the foreman stood up, ready to deliver the verdict that would change everything, for better or worse. The jury deliberation felt like an eternity, though in reality it only lasted a few hours. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Emma sat quietly beside Mark Reynolds, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She tried to focus on staying calm, but her mind raced with possibilities. What if the jury sided with Karen? Would she lose her savings over this? Would Karen use the verdict as ammunition to continue bullying others in the neighborhood? These questions swirled in her head, but deep down Emma reminded herself that she had done nothing wrong. Regardless of the outcome, she knew she had fought for what was right. Across the aisle, Karen fidgeted nervously, glancing at her attorney every few minutes. For someone who prided herself on always being in control, Karen looked unusually uneasy. Her polished exterior, complete with designer blazer and perfectly styled hair, couldn't mask the anxiety written all over her face. She whispered something to Richard Langley, who nodded reassuringly but avoided meeting her eyes. Even he seemed less confident now than he had during his opening statement. Finally, the bailiff called everyone back into the room. The judge entered, and the court fell silent. All eyes turned to the foreman of the jury as he stood up, holding a slip of paper that contained the verdict. Emma held her breath, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure everyone could hear it. Karen leaned forward slightly, her lips pressed together in anticipation. On the charge of negligence brought against the defendant, Emma Thompson, the foreman began, pausing briefly before continuing. The jury finds in favor of the defendant. A collective murmur rippled through the courtroom. Some spectators exchanged surprised glances, while others smiled knowingly. Emma exhaled deeply, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. But the foreman wasn't finished yet. In addition, he continued, regarding the countersuit filed by Emma Thompson against Karen Miller, the jury finds in favor of the plaintiff. We rule that Karen Miller acted unlawfully by trespassing onto the plaintiff's property and destroying her tree without permission. As such, we order Ms. Miller to pay damages totaling $50,000 to cover the loss of the tree, emotional distress, and legal fees incurred by the plaintiff. The room erupted in whispers. Reporters scrambled to jot down notes, neighbors exchanged wide-eyed looks, and Karen's face turned bright red. She shot up from her seat, her voice rising sharply. "This is ridiculous," she exclaimed, pointing accusingly at Emma. "You can't do this to me." The judge banged his gavel firmly. "Order in the court," he commanded, his tone stern. Once the commotion settled, he addressed Karen directly. "Ms. Miller, unless you wish to be held in contempt, I suggest you remain seated and respect the ruling of this court." Defeated, Karen sank back into her chair, her expression a mixture of disbelief and fury. Mark leaned over to Emma and gave her a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "We did it," he whispered with a small smile. Emma nodded, still processing everything that had just happened. It was surreal to think that after months of stress and uncertainty, justice had finally prevailed. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed both women, microphones thrust forward like weapons in a battle for sound bites. Karen pushed past them angrily, refusing to comment, while Emma took a moment to address the crowd. Standing tall despite the chaos around her, she spoke calmly, but confidently. "I'm grateful for the support I've received from my family, friends, and community throughout this ordeal," she said, her voice steady. "This isn't just a win for me. It's a reminder that accountability matters. Taking the law into your own hands has consequences, and I hope this case encourages others to resolve disputes peacefully and respectfully." Her words earned applause from the crowd, including several neighbors who had come to show their support. One elderly woman even approached Emma afterward, tears in her eyes. "Thank you for standing up to her," she said softly. "You've made our neighborhood a better place." Meanwhile, Karen retreated to her car, visibly humiliated. As she drove away, reporters snapped photos of her defeated expression, capturing what many saw as the final blow to her reign as the self-appointed queen of the HOA. Social media lit up within minutes with memes and jokes flooding timelines. One particularly popular post featured a photo of Karen's crushed Tesla captioned, "Karma really is a branch." Back at home, Emma allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The victory was bittersweet. While she was relieved to have closure, she couldn't help but feel sadness over the loss of her beloved oak tree. It wasn't just a piece of property, it had been a living, breathing part of her life for years. Still, she resolved to honor its memory by planting something new in its place. That afternoon, she visited a local nursery and picked out a young sapling, a symbol of renewal and resilience. As she dug a hole in the same spot where the old tree once stood, Emma reflected on everything she'd learned from the experience. She realized how important it was to stand up for herself, even when faced with overwhelming odds. She also recognized the power of community, the countless people who had rallied behind her, offering encouragement and support when she needed it most. And, perhaps most importantly, she understood that sometimes doing the right thing comes at a cost, but it's always worth it in the end. Over the next few days, life in the neighborhood began to return to normal, or as close to normal as possible under the circumstances. Neighbors greeted each other warmly again, no longer divided by the drama between Emma and Karen. Many expressed hope that the incident would serve as a lesson not only for Karen, but for everyone about the importance of respecting boundaries and resolving conflicts peacefully. Karen, on the other hand, became somewhat of a recluse. She stopped attending HOA meetings, avoided social gatherings, and rarely ventured outside except to run errands. Rumors circulated that she planned to sell her house and move elsewhere, unable to face the constant whispers and judgmental stares. Whether or not those rumors were true remained unclear, but one thing was certain: Karen's reputation in the community was irreparably damaged. Emma, meanwhile, embraced her newfound role as a neighborhood hero. People often stopped by her house to chat or thank her for setting an example of courage and integrity. Some even joked that she should run for president of the HOA, though she laughed off the idea. "I think I've had enough drama for one lifetime," she quipped during one such conversation. To mark the occasion, Emma hosted a small gathering in her backyard, inviting her closest friends and supporters. They shared stories, laughter, and plenty of food, celebrating not just the end of the lawsuit but also the strength of their community. As the sun set, casting golden light across the yard, Emma planted the sapling she'd bought earlier. She placed a small sign next to it that read, "Protected by law, touch at your own risk." The crowd erupted in laughter, and Emma smiled, knowing that this new tree represented more than just growth and renewal. It was a testament to resilience, justice, and the enduring spirit of standing up for what is right, even when the odds seem stacked against you. And so, peace returned to the neighborhood, or as close to peace as possible when Karen wasn't around. The weeks following the trial brought a sense of calm to Emma's life that she hadn't felt in months. The lawsuit was over, and justice had been served, not just for her but for the entire neighborhood. Karen's defeat sent a clear message: no one could trample on others' rights without facing consequences. While Emma didn't relish the idea of winning against someone who lived so close by, she couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing that fairness had prevailed. Karen, however, seemed determined to disappear from public view altogether. She stopped attending HOA meetings, avoided eye contact with neighbors during chance encounters at the grocery store, and kept her curtains drawn most of the time. Rumors swirled about her plans to sell her house and leave the neighborhood for good. Some speculated she'd already contacted a real estate agent, though no official listing appeared online. Others claimed they'd seen moving trucks parked outside her driveway late at night, though these reports turned out to be false, or perhaps wishful thinking on the part of those eager to see her go. For Emma, life began returning to normal, or as close to normal as possible after such an unusual ordeal. The support she'd received throughout the legal battle continued even after the verdict. Neighbors dropped by regularly to check on her, bringing fresh-baked cookies, potted plants, or simply kind words. One elderly couple gifted her a wind chime made from recycled materials, saying it would bring positive energy to her backyard. Another neighbor offered to help install a small garden around the newly planted sapling, turning what had once been a barren patch of dirt into a vibrant corner of greenery. Emma embraced these gestures with gratitude, realizing how much stronger her connection to the community had become because of the incident. What started as a personal fight over a tree had evolved into something bigger, a collective effort to stand up against bullying and entitlement. People often joked that Emma should write a book about her experience, calling it How to Survive. HOA Drama 101. She laughed along with them, though secretly she thought it might not be a bad idea. To mark the end of this chapter in her life, Emma decided to host another gathering in her backyard, this time a proper celebration. She invited everyone who had supported her during the lawsuit, friends, neighbors, even the local arborist who had testified in court. The evening was warm and breezy, perfect for outdoor festivities. Strings of fairy lights hung between posts, casting a soft glow over the yard. Music played softly in the background, mingling with the sound of laughter and conversation. As guests mingled, Emma took a moment to stand back and observe the scene. Her heart swelled with appreciation for the people surrounding her. These weren't just neighbors anymore. They were allies, cheerleaders, and friends who had stood by her side when she needed them most. She raised a glass of sparkling cider and addressed the group. "I want to thank each and every one of you for your kindness, encouragement, and unwavering support," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This hasn't been easy, but having all of you behind me made it bearable and sometimes even fun." Laughter rippled through the crowd, and Emma smiled before continuing. What happened here wasn't just about a tree or a car. It was about standing up for what's right, respecting boundaries, and holding each other accountable. I hope this experience reminds us all how important it is to treat one another with fairness and compassion. Her speech earned heartfelt applause, followed by cheers and whistles. Someone shouted, "Speech! Speech!" prompting Mark Reynolds, Emma's attorney, to step forward with his own toast. Holding up a glass of wine, he grinned mischievously. "To Emma," he said, raising his glass higher. "May your new tree grow tall and strong, and may anyone who tries to mess with it think twice before picking up a chainsaw." Everyone erupted into laughter again, including Emma. For the first time in months, she felt truly at peace. The weight of the lawsuit had lifted, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. As the party carried on into the night, Emma wandered over to the sapling she'd planted earlier. Its delicate branches swayed gently in the breeze, catching the light from the fairy bulbs strung above. She knelt beside it, running her fingers lightly over its leaves. "This one's for you," she whispered, imagining the old oak tree watching over its successor. "You gave me shade, memories, and strength. Now it's my turn to give back." She placed a hand on the soil, feeling its coolness beneath her palm. In that moment, she vowed to nurture the sapling with care, ensuring it grew into a symbol of resilience and renewal, for herself and for the community. Across the street, Karen sat alone in her dimly lit living room, staring blankly at the wall. The absence of her Tesla in the driveway served as a constant reminder of everything she'd lost, not just financially, but socially. Gone were the days when she could stroll through the neighborhood, barking orders and demanding compliance. Her reputation lay in ruins, and she knew rebuilding trust would take far more than apologies or explanations. Still, Karen refused to admit fault. Instead, she convinced herself that the world was conspiring against her. "They'll see," she muttered under her breath, scrolling through old photos of her pristine bay windows and unobstructed views. "One day they'll realize I was right all along." But deep down, doubt crept in. Had she gone too far? Was it really worth losing friendships, respect, and her prized car over a tree? The question lingered unanswered as she switched off the lamp and retreated to bed, Pulling the covers tightly around her shoulders, sleep came fitfully, plagued by dreams of falling branches and angry neighbors pointing accusing fingers. When morning arrived, Karen woke exhausted, her resolve slightly shaken but still intact. She told herself she'd find a way to reclaim her status someday, even if it meant starting over somewhere else. Back in Emma's yard, the celebration wound down as guests began heading home. A few lingered to help clean up, insisting that Emma shouldn't have to do it alone. As the last plates were cleared and the final chairs stacked, Emma stood once more in the quiet embrace of her backyard. The stars glittered overhead, their light reflecting off the dew forming on the grass. She took a deep breath, savoring the crisp night air. In the distance, she heard faint footsteps approaching. Turning around, she saw her next-door neighbor, Mrs. Harper, walking toward her with a basket of freshly baked muffins. "I thought you might need something sweet tomorrow morning," the older woman said with a warm smile, handing over the basket. "And maybe a little extra sunshine for your new tree." Emma accepted the gift with tears glistening in her eyes. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion, "for everything." Mrs. Harper patted her arm reassuringly. "We're all in this together, dear. Always remember that." With those words, Emma felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. Life had thrown challenges her way, but she'd faced them head-on with courage, integrity, and the unwavering support of those around her. And while the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, she knew she'd never walk it alone. As the night drew to a close, Emma stepped inside, leaving the fairy lights twinkling softly in the darkness. She glanced one last time at the sapling, before closing the door, its tiny form silhouetted against the starry sky. Someday it would grow tall and strong, just like the tree that had come before it. Until then, Emma promised herself she'd protect it fiercely, honoring the lessons she'd learned along the way, because sometimes the smallest acts of defiance can spark the biggest changes. And in the end, justice, like trees, takes root where it's nurtured with care.